Good morning. Welcome to the September 22nd, 2022 special meeting of the City Council's Law and Regulation Committee. Clerk.
Thank you. With that, we'll do a roll call. Vice Mayor Heldeshelt.
Here.
Councilmember Mendoza.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Ellen, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next up, we have public comments on non-agenda items, if there's any member of the public. Okay. The next item is the approval of the minutes of the prior meeting, and I want to thank the clerk and her staff for this. So we'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Thank you.
You have to motion.
Oh,
I have
I'm
to
sorry.
second, yeah. I think the chairman
I
can't make a
thought you
motion.
made the motion.
The chair, we will take a motion.
We're pre-coffee here, Bruce.
All
Make the
right.
motion to approve the minutes from the last
I'll
L&R
second
meeting.
it since I'm the only other person here.
Thank you.
All righty.
Minutes are approved.
All right. And now we'll go to our regular order of business with reports, state and federal. We're going to reverse this. We're going to hear first from Noel Maddock with our Environmental Utilities Department update.
That's item 6.2.
6.2.
Good morning, Vice Mayor Heldeshelt and Councilmember Mendoza. This morning, I will be highlighting several bills awaiting action by the governor and two that did not survive the legislative process.
You have a PowerPoint? Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
There we go.
I was giving it a minute. First, I would like to give some stats on the bills that the Environmental Utilities Department engaged on this past year. We identified 25 high-priority bills that we engaged on, 14 of which we supported, and 9 of those are on the governor's desk awaiting action. Environmental Utilities also opposed 11 bills. Only 3 of those are on his desk. 4 bills did not make it through the legislative process, and 4 bills we were able to achieve amendments on and were able to go neutral. I'm going to cover several bills that are awaiting action on the governor's desk. The first 2 bills that I will be covering this morning are ones that Roseville supported and are now awaiting his actions. AB 2374 deals with illegal dumping. Roseville supported this measure as it can serve as a deterrent for those illegal actions, as well as helping to address illegal dumping within the city limits. Specifically, what this bill will do will increase the maximum fines for the illegal dumping for a business employing more than 10 full-time employees. The maximum fines will increase by 30% on the first and second convictions and by 50% to the third conviction. It also does require any person that is convicted of that illegal dumping to pay for the cost of cleaning it up or actually doing the cleanup themselves. The second measure we supported on the governor's desk is AB 2247. I presented this bill before. It will create a statewide database for products and product components that contain PFAS. And starting on July 1st of 2025, manufacturers will be required to register their products or product components that contain intentionally added PFAS onto that database. AB 2247 is supported by Roseville so that the state can get a better handle on how these man-made chemicals are making it into the environment, and so that the state can better regulate the manufacturers and products containing PFAS instead of passing those costs on to our ratepayers. The next 2 measures I'll be covering are ones that Roseville has had an oppose unless amended position on, and again are awaiting action by the governor. The first is SB 222, which would create a statewide low-income rate assistance program. Roseville, through our associations, was able to attain amendments to the bill so that the State Water Board can develop a program to look very similar to the LIWAP program, which is the Low Income Household Water and Wastewater Assistance Payment Program, that is currently helping our residents with any arrearages they may have until 2023. Submit a request to the governor for a veto on this measure. The next measure has been before this committee as well, and is SB 1157, which will establish a new indoor water use objective that actually rolls up into the city's future water budget. That was established with the passage of SB 606 and AB 1668 that was passed in 2017. The legislation was developed to provide water agencies flexibility to make cost-effective investments to meet our water budgets. However, as the state is developing the regulations, they are removing any flexibility. This ultra-low, 42 gallons per capita daily in 2030, will impact the city's ability to make our water budget, as well as make us potentially subject to fines. Lastly, as a full-service city, these ultra-low flows not only affect our water utility, but they also impact our wastewater and recycled utilities as well. The next two bills that I'll talk about today are bills that did not make it to the governor's desk. They are what failed passage. We did oppose both of these measures, so it is a small win for our considerations. AB 1931 dealt with lead pipes, and I will say that throughout the legislative process, this measure was amended and got better. However, it was duplicative and conflicted with both state law and the newly adopted federal lead and copper rule. This is why we were opposed to the measure. Some of the issues that we had were that it required the local agencies to offer to remove those said lead service lines from a property, which is on private property, but then it also required us to seek fundings from the state and federal government to help pay for those customer removals. The last measure I am going to cover today is SB 1124, which would have required the Office of Environmental Health Hazard and Assessment, commonly referred to as OEHA, to develop a public health goal for manganese. Manganese is already a secondary drinking water standard that is established for it, as well as a notification level. This secondary notification level is enforceable, and there's nothing preventing OEHA or the State Water Board from acting on this to advance that. Our concerns were that this legislation was actually disregarding all of the science and the regulatory process that is already in place. So that's why we had concerns on this measure. This actually concludes my presentation this morning, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Great. Councilman Mendoza, any questions?
We got a pretty good average, wins and losses on this. I appreciate the report. I have no questions for you. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
No, thank you for your good work. We'll open it up to public comment. Seeing none, thank you, Noel. And the governor has till September 30th,
That's correct.
and he's he's back in town today, so we may see a flurry of signatures, huh?
Breeze in.
Yes.
Thank you, Noel.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to item, where's my agenda? 6.1,
State and federal priorities.
Mr. Walensky. State and federal priority legislation.
Good morning, Vice Mayor Howdy Shelton, Councilmember Mendoza. Once again, Mark Walensky, Government Relations Administrator, and I'm joined this morning for today's presentation by Rob Becerra, the Police Department's Public Information Officer. Our presentation this morning is a brief overview of priority legislation related to public safety, homelessness, and power. Amber Blix and Chris Romero send their apologies. They're not able to be at today's meeting as they're attending the Northern California Power Association's annual conference. So their items are included in our presentation. The legislature was very active on the final day of session and acted on hundreds of bills on that day. As Noel mentioned, staff will continue to advocate on bills that were passed by the legislature and sent to the governor. And the governor has until September 30th, which is the last day for him to sign or veto bills. At this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Rob.
Thank you, Mark. Highlighting very briefly two pieces of legislation that made it to the governor's desk that we continue to track, and one that has seen some significant evolution from our initial opposition to the bill to now just watching it to see what happens, which is AB 2773. This requires each state and local agency to include in its annual report with data on all stops conducted by the agency's peace officers for the reasons given to the persons stopped at the time of the stop. Now, if you recall, the evolution here was from an officer would have had to notify the individual at the time of the stop, here is why I pulled you over, immediately. And it has shifted now to just being rolled into the annual report. So again, much less impactive on an officer's ability to patrol the streets or even pull someone over, but does put potentially another requirement on the police department to we already track this information, but now to be able to track it and then put it in a presentable format in the organization's annual report. So we'll continue to watch that to see what the governor does with it. And then the other piece of legislation that we'll mention is something that we have discussed before, which is 1788. And this is specific to the hotel industry where there is the potential for liability to be had or civil penalties imposed on hotel staff. This language has adjusted more where it started with hotel supervisory staff who knowingly knew that potential sex trafficking was taking place and they did not notify law enforcement. The bill has continued to extend now where it's beyond supervisory staff, and it's anyone in that hotel, especially if someone has knowledge that this inappropriate activity is occurring in the hotel, or they are potentially receiving any benefits from it. And I think what they're attempting to get at this at that length of the legislation is someone is aware this activity is happening. They don't report it to law enforcement throughout the entire hotel staff. So this could be, down to the person working the front desk, the supervisor of the hotel, or even someone cleaning the hotel. If they don't report that suspicious activity to law enforcement, they could be held civilly liable. So an interesting shift, but obviously working to combat the ongoing issue of sex trafficking, human trafficking throughout the state. At this time, those are my two pieces of legislation covering at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Becerra.
Okay, and the next two bills relate to homelessness, and these are two bills that we've brought to the committee over the course of the year. Assembly Bill 325, which is the Veterans Discharge Upgrade Bill, and this bill would require the Department of Veterans Affairs to establish a Veterans Military Discharge Upgrade Program. And we know that the type of a discharge that a veteran receives will impact their ability to realize various benefits and services once they're out of the service. And this can have significant implications for homeless veterans. This program would provide a new option for veterans to understand and apply for discharge upgrade as needed. Senate Bill 1338, which is the Community Assistance Recovery and Empowerment or CARE Court Act bill. This bill would enact the CARE Act, which would authorize certain people to petition a civil court to create a voluntary care agreement or ordered care plan. We are working to understand how this bill will impact the city's homelessness efforts and how it will be incorporated to help those that are homeless and who have serious mental issues. With respect to problems during extreme events, and then with respect to AB 2133 and SB 1391, ultimately both of these bills failed, but the main point that we wanted to share with the committee on these bills is that staff worked through our trade associations to move from a watch position to an opposed position, and ultimately were able to gain collective support through the effort and ultimately resulting in these two bills failing. And then on to the Federal Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA. So the IRA is a $737 billion fiscal year 2022 budget reconciliation package that was recently signed into law by President Biden. There will be likely opportunities within the IRA for various city departments to realize funding for projects and or new resources for their customers. The following is a brief overview of a number of the areas where the IRA may provide funding opportunities within the Department of Transportation, or DOT, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, and then with respect to publicly owned utilities. So within the Department of Transportation, there is a Neighborhood Access and Equity Grant Program is funded at $3.2 billion to support neighborhood equity, safety, and affordable transportation access with competitive grants to reconnect communities divided by existing infrastructure barriers, mitigate negative impacts of transportation facilities or construction projects on disadvantaged or underserved communities, and support equitable transportation planning and community engagement activities. With respect to HUD, the IRA provides $940 million to HUD for affordable housing purposes. Eligible recipients include providers under Section 8, the Supportive Housing for the Elderly Program, Supportive Housing for Persons with Disabilities Program, or rental and cooperative housing, as well as those who had project-based rental assistant and housing assistant payment contracts for fiscal year 2021-2022. HUD could support as much as $4 billion in loans and could construct the loans to be converted to grants if an owner agrees to an extended period of affordability. And then with respect to the IRA related to publicly owned utilities, there are several areas that we're watching very closely, and they include direct pay, clean vehicle tax credits, energy tax credits, and additional energy investments. And so the department is seeking opportunities to participate in the programs, the electric department, is seeking opportunities to participate in the programs provided by this legislation. Utilities are awaiting guidance from the U.S. Department of Energy and the Internal Revenue Service on many of these provisions because they are tax-related. Staff will continue to monitor and work closely with the American Public Power Association, our federal trade partners, during the implementation stage of this new legislation to understand how we will be able to access that and what programs that might be related to and attractive to our customers. So in conclusion, government relations staff continues to advocate on bills sent to the governor for his consideration and will do so until September 30th, the last day for the governor to sign or veto bills. We will also bring back information on bills that were signed or vetoed by the governor at the next L&R committee meeting, which is on Thursday, October 27th at 9 a.m. And this concludes our presentation, and we're prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Walensky. Councilman Mendoza.
Just one real quick question. Rob, on AB 1788, so hotels, especially some of the large chain hotels currently, you know, it's required of them to have sexual harassment training, compliance training, even some CP&I and data training for the collection and storage of credit card data and personal information on customers and clients. And that's imposed by the state in some instances, especially the sexual harassment and the data collection. But in this bill, AB 1788, did we find out, or did you get the impression that there's going to also be a requirement for sex trafficking training? Or is that just something that they are going to, as an as-needed basis, make sure that they notify law enforcement and kind of like a, see something, say something, or are we going to put some teeth behind it?
There is nothing in the piece of legislation that mandates specific training in the space that you're discussing.
Okay.
But one would presume now that there's that civil liability that hotels would implement some sort of a training or reporting program. I think to your point, though, it actually does have fill a little bit of a gap where potentially law enforcement could step in with that training ahead of time to say, we recognize this is coming, and here's how you follow through with recognizing, reporting suspicious
Kind of where
activity.
I was going. Yeah, okay. Fair enough. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you for your report. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, you covered a lot in a very brief amount of time.
Yeah, impressive.
I'm looking forward to the full debrief on October 27th at our next Law and Regulation Committee. And I think that brings us to the end of our business today. We'll adjourn to the meeting of October 27th at 9 a.m. back here in the council chambers. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. You need water?
All right.